Welcome to my FrameWork Shipwrights series, where my Shipwright patrons submit framework concepts for me to build upon. This episode's Shipwright is FreeWilliam, proposing Pixie Edgelord Atlas, a lifesteal tanking playstyle with Enduring Affliction. He requested that I make a sufficiently derpy fashion frame to go with this playstyle, so here's my rendition. Behold, Cursed Blarney Stone Atlas. Shout out to anyone familiar with my Joey Zero Weekly Warframe Show exclusive, Shamrock Prince Atlas. This is the upgraded version, worthy to wield the speed and status we're about to indulge in. So again, the idea here is a flavor of lifesteal tanking that uses extremely high melee attack speed and Atlas's passive, which renders him immune to knockdowns while on the ground to not die, among other things, and, kill the enemies. As you can see with Healing Return, which is a staple of this loadout, we're very easily able to stay alive while doing damage. And as you can see, the damage is, it's damage, but it really kicks into overdrive once we start channeling, and I'll talk about why once we get to showing the build. And the enemies are sort of dying, or so it might seem to you, but they're actually dying pretty good, and I'll show that by backing off. You saw that enemy I slash procced doesn't appear to be unslash procking very much. Isn't having a good time with not having slash procs, and in fact they had a very bad time not having slash procs. They have all the slash procs. They have the most slash procs. So I know this looks a little weird. It's like status duration at 150% of what status duration to what statuses. This is adding status duration to statuses on your enemies. So when you hit an enemy with a status effect, this is like beating more status into them. That is what it does. But I'm going to take off the things he said were not core. He said this is basically the core. He uses Prime Fury and Berserker. This is really important for healing return throughput, and it also makes Weeping Wounds charge up really fast. Staves in particular are also really important to this loadout. He specified a staff and a Zaw staff and one that is focused on status, so I used the closest thing I had. And as you can see, this one has enough status to get pretty much max status chance after 2.5x counter or so with Weeping Wounds. And that's obviously important for healing return, but it's also important that it be a staff because staves have lots of really good multi-hits on their stance while also having very good movement. I'll show that off in a few minutes. Now, we're going to season the build to taste with Condition Overload. Still got pretty good status spread, even with no elements and no pressure point in this build. We have very low base damage, but you still get there, and again, we'll talk about why as we go on. I'm using Drifting Contact. I think a little more status is nice, and we want Weeping Wounds to stay active. And then Enduring Affliction, again, I think this is a very powerful option here. And Prime Breach, this is definitely wanting to hit lots of enemies for healing return, etc. I'm also going to be adding Exodia Force to this setup. This is really good with healing return. The damage is bad because it doesn't work with Condition Overload, and it can't crit, and it can't inflict status, and the damage is radial, so it's weaker at the edges. So the damage is not good, but the packet of damage can proc healing return. So this is kind of like getting 50% more hits, and because they're radial, and they have a 6-meter range, this makes you heal a lot faster with healing return. This is absurd healing speed. It's like almost impossible to die when using this with healing return. But you can see we have basically no base damage, so the reason this is actually killing things is because of Enduring Affliction. Because we're using Atlas, and because we have Hunter Adrenaline and so much bulk, we really don't need to worry about the channeling cost at all. You can just channel as much as you want. Basically, this build is scaling its status in a way that is different from the combo counter. So instead of scaling up its damage or its critical chance or whatever, you are scaling up Weeping Wounds, you're kind of snowballing instead. So like whenever you inflict a status effect, it's basically permanent because we attack so fast and Enduring Affliction adds so much duration. You're effectively making any status effects that you inflict permanent. So you're going to see if I go into these enemies and channel from the start and then attack, and you see a hilarious amount of explosions from my glorious Blarney Stone Exodia Force, then you'll see that these enemies will get slashed up a little bit. I'll slash them up a little bit. And you can see that movement I was talking about. You see you do the stand combo and you move really fast. Then you do the forward combo and suddenly you get big multi-hits. It's a little bit counterintuitive in the sense that the pushing forward makes you slow down and then not pushing forward makes you speed up, which that's weird, but that's how this stance works. And now you can see that these enemies have been cursed. Aha, that is why it is called Cursed Blarney Stone Atlas. As you can see, they are condemned to death by touching the Blarney Stone, as they are non-believers. And they they're just going to bleed out. It's going to take them a very long time to die, but they will die, they will. So this is all well and good. And as you saw, this Atlas build is basically just a pile of tankiness. This is basically a generalist shell of a loadout, which is something that a lot of players really like. They want to have space to be able to use whatever weapons they're feeling like, maybe new weapons or whatever, while still having a solid base and some survivability and like a trump card ability. And Enduring Affliction definitely serves that. Atlas definitely serves that. You're not going to get knocked down. You're not going to die. You're certainly not going to die. And it doesn't really do a lot else, but you don't necessarily need a lot else. It just lets you be a rock and do whatever you want with your gun slots. And again, I didn't talk about this build much when we passed it by, but it's very general, not really power stat focused, just a bit of range, which I believe FreeWilliam is using for the punches to close gaps. I actually find it most useful for Atlas's third ability, but we'll talk a little bit more about why once I make a little modification, because this could become an even more generalist loadout. The problem that I see with it right now is that you have to melee almost all the time or you die really quickly. You get a huge amount of healing throughput through healing return, and I even added Exodia Force to enemies that you're actually attacking, but once you stop, the enemies might die, like they probably will die from all the Enduring Affliction status effects, but you're also going to die because you need enemies right in front of you that you're melee attacking to heal. I can think of a way to solve that. I think Enduring Affliction is actually stronger with Life Strike. I'm going to use a fully ranked Life Strike and take this off. This is going to make my channeling meaningfully more expensive, a lot more expensive, and I do think you need a fully ranked Life Strike. I'll show you why in a minute. But this is going to synergize better with Enduring Affliction because while you're channeling with Life Strike, slash procs inflicted by Life Strike channeled attacks heal you for the full duration of their slash proc. That's going to cost a lot more, so we're going to have to stop at times to take some damage and heal. Then we're going to attack with channeling again. I keep slashing them up with channeling. We're going to keep moving around and slashing them up with channeling. We need to get good and slashy with lots of AoE channeling attacks. And as I haven't been emphasizing this, but it's super, super easy with this stance and this and the speed really does make a difference. And now that they're slashed up, we're just going to stand here and take a look at our health bar. Yeah, it's not really going anywhere, is it? It's, no. Essentially, while these enemies are alive and able to threaten you, you are unkillable because they have so many slash procs beaten into them that had Life Strike applied to them, which means that you have such a gigantic source of healing as long as these enemies are still alive that it's kind of impossible for you to die so long as you might be threatened. So as soon as the threats to you are dead, then maybe you can die, but while they're alive, you pretty much can't. And this means that you can stop using melee if you want to and do some gunplay if you so desire, while still being completely tanky. And this also, of course, still keeps you alive while you're getting attacked. Although I do want to note that the healing throughput is pretty low up front because the swings are so individually weak. You see like the damage I'm hitting is like 20s, 30s, not actually very high because it's inhibited by all this armor. Even with Condition Overload, you don't get very good healing until you have the slash procs with Life Strike active. But then once you do, again, you're just immortal and unkillable. You could just literally stand around and there could be twice this many enemies, and I'm like barely even going below 700 health, and I literally have level 135 heavy gunners just like mowing into me. This seems like a relatively good time to mention the fact that I'm using really, really high level enemies here. It doesn't really make that much of a difference whether you use, a lot less damage mods and focus on this style of play rather than using the normal hybrid build or whatever until you get to somewhat higher levels because Condition Overload is so gross. But I do want to show you the difference between killing the enemies that way and killing the enemies with like a normal build. So I'm going to attack the enemies non-stop and kill them with channeling. So we're going to channel. We're just going to mow into these enemies and do this until they die. So I'm going to try to micromanage, like this enemy probably has enough slash procs. So we're going to go over here, and that enemy died. Cool. Focus on this enemy. And then we're going to try and kill them all as fast as possible by using this. And you can see that it's actually not great at this. The Zaw is actually not that good at this because while it does a lot of damage to the enemies over time, it doesn't really accelerate that damage that well by attacking them further. Like it doesn't add a lot of damage in a single hit necessarily. Now, once you have these slash procs, sure, that's a lot of healing that you've just beaten into that enemy, and quite a lot of damage too, but you can't make it happen faster. And as a matter of fact, with only one enemy, this is suddenly actually really weak, because we can't get it to happen any faster. Okay, well, goodbye. Anyway, you can see that it's not the fastest if you want to kill the enemies up front, but once you slash damage into them like this with Life Strike, they are effectively dead, and since they're effectively dead because of those slash procs that are healing you, you're not in danger of them being effectively dead, but not dead yet. You were with the healing return variant, but Life Strike solves that, and I think it's a big gain for this kind of build. I do want to quickly show that it is a lot of damage you're losing. I have no critical chance, but it does have a bevy of status and pressure point, so a good mix of damage and condition overload. Still healing return, still Exodia Force. This still heals you for a lot. It doesn't do that Life Strike thing, which is a huge advantage that build now has. But you can see that this can kill things a lot faster, and it's not even a specialized damage weapon. This is the Zaw that I normally use for just healing throughput, and you can see it only takes about 3 or 4 seconds to kill these enemies from a cold start. And now that I really have it wound up, like, takes 3-2 seconds depending on how the procs work, like, super fast. So you are losing a really huge amount of damage by setting this up, but it does mean that you're a lot more stable, and you can survive very high levels. You can survive especially high levels because of the fact that this is using both Vitality and Steel Fiber and Prime Flow Quick Thinking with Hunter Adrenaline. Because even if you use all your health, you lose all your health, you'll be going into Quick Thinking, but being periodically healed by all of your lifesteal. And then Hunter Adrenaline will give you back little bits of energy. That'll give you back, Quick Thinking will buffer, and then you'll have more time to heal. And then, so really, you would have to take a tremendous amount of damage to actually die with this setup while using the Life Strike thing. This is like almost the highest healing throughput that is even possible in Warframe, although you could make it a little higher by adding damage elsewhere, but this does the job very well. So with this specialized tool, we have a setup where we can kill enemies with our melee very effectively, just not quickly, and we really can't die. It's really absurd to be worried about dying as this loadout. So what I want to do is add tools to round it out a little bit. Yes, you may wish to use it as a generalist setup, but there are some relatively general things that synergize with this that you might have a lot of fun with, so I'm going to suggest a few. We're going to start simple. It's not super fun to try to melee some bosses, so let's use the Synod Gamcore and shoot those bosses. A really nice thing to add to shells like this that have like a, they are general, but they have like a trump card, is to add something that's really unrelated to the trump card so that you have something stable in case something isn't working. Like if you have no energy or something, this not only gives you energy back, solving that problem with its syndicate power, it also doesn't use any of the same mechanics. We're using corrosive magnetic. This doesn't dip into any of the mechanics we were talking about before. It's pretty much completely unrelated to the rest of the loadout, but that adds stability, and that means that you can use it in a pinch if there's anything wrong. But this also has some added synergy because it's a very precise weapon. So normally, in the middle of all these enemies, I don't really want to stand still and like aim at them, but it would help that a lot. Atlas's passive, which makes him immune to knockdowns, and getting this huge amount of healing. So we're going to slash these enemies up with our slashy, healy lifesteal procs, and leave them like that. We're going to go over here real quick and do the same to these guys. And now, because these enemies are giving us such high passive healing, I can take out my Synod Gammacore, and let's say these enemies were like in the air, or they were enemies somewhere else or something. I have so much health that I can just stand around and take my time aiming at their heads. And now you're dead. How nice and relaxing. And now you're going to die. I'm not even aiming that well. How relaxing and nice. And the only thing you have to worry about is that you are killing your healing source as you're killing your damage sources. But because they're doing damage to you and giving you healing, it does usually even out, and it's no big deal. Just keep that in mind. You are killing your healing as well. And that makes it a lot easier to aim with a really precise weapon like this, so it's super nice. And again, it's not like Synod Gammacore is the only weapon that fits the bill for this. You could use Recta Ballistica if you like that weapon, or, any number of more precise weapons. You could use Lex Prime, I don't know. And it sort of backs up the fact that you have time to aim to use a very high damage weapon that wants some aim. But I do think Synod Gammacore is one of the stronger choices, and it's a little ammo hungry, so maybe we use Carrier. I tend to recommend Carrier as a Sentinel if your loadout is really jumping into the fray and getting its hands dirty. Carrier is great because it has the highest overall survivability, and especially the highest health and armor. So if you're jumping into the fray and your carrier is going to get hit by lots of explosions and stuff, it's relatively likely to actually be alive at the end of that. And it will also, of course, give your Synod Gamcore some ammo. So if you'd like to see those builds, let's flash them really quick. Very basic carrier build. I go for triple survivability mods here. Carrier also has okay shields, which I think are a little more valuable in Sentinels since they often get grazed by attacks and then they don't really get focus fired, so they have time to regenerate their shields. Go figure. Of course, you want Sacrifice and primed regen on there. And then my Synod Gamcore build's kind of boring. This is just normal hybrid build. I like to use Ruinous Extension as my last mod. If you're going to use this to fight bosses and like far away targets, I think you definitely want Ruinous Extension. Generally, I think Seeker is interesting and worthwhile on this weapon, but I think here its use case wants range. So that's a recommendation. And here's a more synergistic recommendation. Atlas does have a kind of hidden part of his kit that is sort of secretly built for by this loadout. We don't really have good damage with our punches because we have bad strength, but this does actually do some interesting other things. So the range does something interesting, and that is make your 3 really good. The 3 is actually a pretty good radius, pretty usable radius, and Atlas's 3 pauses status duration. So we don't really need that with our melee weapon. I got excited at first because I was thinking, oh, we can accelerate the slash procs and also pause status duration. So I'm going to show you something real quick. I'm going to attack these enemies I'm not channeling, and now I'm going to freeze them. These enemies have normal slash proc duration, but you can see that they're stuck in the stone, and so it's paused, and they're just ticking off, and then it will resume its normal short duration once they get out. I'm going to channel and hit them a little bit, and now you're going to see that it's not going to run out. They're just going to bleed for a long time. So you can Enduring Affliction enemies while they're in the stone. You can't slash proc them, but you can Enduring Affliction them, which is relevant. That's something you will want to do from time to time, sure. But there's another combo that you can do that I'm going to show off, and that is with the Tsar. The Tsar is a weapon that can do really well with 100 munitions, viral, those stats. So I'm going to shoot these enemies, and then I'm going to pause them. And they're going to die. They're dead. Goodbye. It's that comically exploded. And you can see these enemies might not be completely dead, but I can add to the duration of those viral procs and the 100 munitions procs while they're stoned, which means they're just definitely going to die. I can slash some lifesteal into them and do whatever, but they also have viral procs, so my condition overload is even more crazy, and I only have to bleed them for half as much, and it's great. So it's not only synergistic, it also stands alone. This is just my regular Tsar build, and it is powerful anyway, as you saw with the first few shots. And you can use it as a shotgun, you can use it as a ranged wave clearer, you can use it for enemies that are hard to get to. With this really simple build that I hugely over-forma, you could probably do this with like 3 forma. Very, very simple build. Not even necessarily like the craziest Tsar build ever, but it does very well with this setup. And the status duration pausing allows you to achieve condition overload craziness that would not otherwise be so possible by allowing you to sort of save those status effects and then take all the time in the world, la-di-da-di-da, getting ready to apply Let's Do Corrosive and Magnetic. So this guy already has viral and slash. Let's increase the duration of those a little bit. And now we're going to give this one Corrosive and Magnetic as well. Come on. Don't be scared. And now pause. And now we're going to increase the duration of that. And, heal with those enemies too. And because we have such crazy healing throughput, we can afford to screw around like this as much as we want. Now this enemy has a whole lot of stuff going on. I'm gonna slash these guys up. And you see now this enemy is taking pretty disgusting damage from our normal melee attacks. You saw there that just the raw damage we were doing was pretty equivalent to my other Za. So if you had a very, very heavy target at a really high level, you could use this to sort of homebrew a crazy hybrid condition overload weapon and kill them really, really fast without being vulnerable for very meaningful lengths of time. Do a little Blarney Stone cursing, if you will. That's pretty much it. I mean, I think this is a really fun shell, and there's some cool synergy to be had as well that is not super combo-y if you don't want it to be. Enduring Affliction is awesome. I just like, wow. Especially Life Strike Enduring Affliction is gross. So FreeWilliam, thank you for proposing this FrameWork Shipwrights episode, and thank you for being a patron. Your support has helped tremendously. I hope that you enjoyed my rendition of your awesome idea. It was a lot of fun to do. Hey, this is really good range. Look at that. Anyway, and I'll see you all in the next one. I look forward to more shipwright creations in the future.